Our next category, Brian, is kind of a fun one. This is going to be the young guy who we think could potentially step up and play a major role.
Up-and-comers.
An up-and-comer. So, for example, like last year, Kyron Williams would have fit perfectly in this category. As a freshman, he had 4 carries. And then as a sophomore,
played
he was
4 games. Yeah,
4 carries in
4 games.
You know, 1,000-yard rusher, second-team All-American, right? So he's the poster child for this category. Right. Okay. And
who would not be a poster child for this category is a guy like Chris Tyree.
Correct.
Who potentially could have a breakout season, but he almost had 500 yards last year. So we're trying to keep this on guys that maybe didn't play a lot, you know, a Miles Boykin type of break. Well, he'd be kind of a different category, but like just that guy that we've seen, he's played a little. He's a redshirt freshman, a true sophomore, or a redshirt sophomore that we think has a chance to kind of take that big jump. And I think it was hard to pick 3 because there's a lot of guys which says a lot about this team. It's going to be a relatively young team at a lot of skill positions.
Yes.
And there was a lot of guys to potentially choose from.
So Brian, I'll kick it off with my first guy. And, you know, we've talked about him a lot and because he's got talent and we have not had the opportunity to see number 82 on the field. And well, he was on the field, but you know what I mean. In a competitive situation, to get a catch, for example. And that's Xavier Watts. I've told this story before, but guess what? I'm telling it again. The one practice we got to see last year for spring practice, he was wearing number 21, and that was my number in high school. So like I automatically kind of look for that number because I'm an idiot, and he was on fire. Like he was a man amongst boys, and he was an early enrollee, and he was making plays. He was running by guys.
Confident.
And I remember standing there talking to you. I'm like, who is that number 21? And you're like, Xavier Watts. I told you he's going to be good. And I said,
I say it quite that arrogantly.
Well, you know,
I might have thought it that arrogantly, but I didn't say
I'm shrinking the conversation. But I remember talking to you about him. And then I was watching him the entire practice, and he stood out. I mean, as an early enrollee, he stood out. And I would love to see what he is going, you know, with a year under his belt. Obviously, he didn't get any playing time as in the fall. What is he going to look like in the spring? I think he could have a breakout year. There's opportunities, obviously, at wide receiver, more so than just starting. If they go 6 deep at wide receiver, I will be ecstatic. And if he's not one of those 6, there's something wrong. And, I mean, he is a player, and I want to see him on the field.
It's all about opportunity for Xavier. I mean, that's it. It's. I know if he gets a legitimate opportunity that he'll play and he'll make plays.
Yes,
but I don't know that he's going to get that legitimate opportunity. Especially when I heard that he's playing, that there's a good chance he's going to start the spring at the boundary position. Like when I heard that, it was kind of like, okay, so they just moving him there to like take reps because Kevin Austin's out. But they're, you know, if he was competing for playing time, why wouldn't they have him at like the X and the Z where his skill set is best suited? That was my negative view of how they treat receivers aspect of it. But perhaps it could also be indicative of, hey, you know, maybe they view him as a Chris Brown type of boundary player. And remember, in 2015, Notre Dame had a 175, 180-pound boundary receiver in Chris Brown. They used that position differently because they didn't have that big horse like they've had in recent seasons. So, you know, hopefully that's it. But I just hope it's an opportunity. And I hope that Xavier takes whatever reps he gets and just balls out and says, hey, whether you are going to give me an opportunity or not, I'm going to force it upon you. And hopefully they still do that. I have a natural skepticism on whether or not they're actually going to play the best players.
So do I.
And we've seen Brian Kelly, whether it's veterans or children of famous people, or I mean, there's always been things you kind of like, but that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But if Xavier gets his chance, then I have no doubt that he's going to step up. And the same thing is true of my number 1 guy, Vince, and that's Jordan Johnson.
Yep. And I kind of lump them together a little bit,
which is why we decided to go the route we did. To me, these 2 guys could have a big impact this year. And Jordan Johnson's the kind of guy that I could see go from not playing a whole lot to being their best receiver. I mean, he's literally that good. He could be that good. Whether or not that's going to happen or not, we'll see. He's got to take advantage of it. He is going to get an opportunity this spring. And the fact that he's not playing W, at least in workouts and things that I've heard, he's not playing W, tells me they're looking to find a hole for him. a home for him, and they're not just going to plant him behind Kevin Austin like they did last year with him behind
right.
Javon McKinley, those guys. So that's a positive sign, and if he can take advantage of the opportunity he's going to get this spring, step up, make some plays, be the player that you and I both know he can be. Now, all of a sudden, we're heading into this offseason saying, boy, Notre Dame's got a chance to be really good at wide receiver. And I know that this guy – I don't care about experience at receiver as much as – that's the funny thing for me. Brian Kelly is so obsessed with experience at receiver. And to me, that is one of two positions on offense that really the whole football field that I just don't care about experience.
Yeah.
We've seen in the past, Golden Tate went from 6 catches to 1,000 yards in a year. Freshman to sophomore, 6 catches as a freshman, 58 for over 1,000 as a sophomore.
But he got much smarter from freshman to sophomore year.
Right. Well, that was Charlie Weiss's deal. Golden didn't actually know how to run routes because he was kind of a running back in high school. And it's like, I don't care. If you can't teach him to run a hitch, a slant, a go, and a drag in fall camp, then you're a terrible receivers coach. But Rob Ianello was a pretty terrible receivers coach. Good recruiter, but pretty terrible receivers coach. So I get that one. But he went, Will Fuller went from 6 catches in 2013 to 76 catches in year 2 for over 1,000 yards. So this isn't like an absurd, unheard of thing to see a guy have that kind of breakout. Do I anticipate Jordan Johnson being the next guy to go from nothing to 1,000 yards? I don't think it's going to be quite that big of a jump. He's capable of it, but I just think the ball's going to get spread around too much for that.
Yeah.
But could he have a Chase Claypool type of second-year jump or better? Sure. Chase Claypool went from 5 catches as a freshman in 2015 or 2016 to, I believe, like 29 in 2017 on an offense that didn't throw much. That's the other thing. You have to, so 29 catches for over 400 yards in an offense that didn't throw a whole lot. So I could certainly see Jordan Johnson making that type of jump at the very least in his second season.
All right, if we're snaking, buddy, it's your turn, or I can lead off. It's up to you.
You go ahead and keep going.
Okay,
I told you we're going to mix this up. We're going to
know.
snake some. We're just going to go back and forth.
Well,
let's keep it fresh.
And we talked about the offensive line earlier in the week, and that's the direction that we're headed to next. And we went into pretty good detail on these next two guys. And for me, it's Tosh Baker. I think he's pushing for some serious playing time this year, if not as a starter. Do I want to see him starting at left tackle? Not really. I would rather see him at right tackle for a year or two and then move over and be a dominant left tackle. That's what I personally would like to see. But I think he has the opportunity sitting in front of him with the wide open offensive line that we're talking about. I mean, you got one returning starter, and with Jarrett Patterson being somewhat limited or limited in spring practice, we don't know what position he's going to be at. We've heard tackle. Is it going to be left tackle? Is it going to be right tackle? What are they going to do with Josh Lugg? I think Tosh Baker is one of the dominoes that is going to have an effect on where those two guys are playing. And from what we're hearing about Tosh Baker, sky's the limit for this kid. And he's a sophomore with freshman eligibility. So he's a young guy, which is why I prefer him at right tackle right now. But we'll see what happens. But he is a guy that I would be zeroing in on when I'm watching the offensive line for sure.
Andrew Kristofic's the one for me. He's a redshirt sophomore.
Sure.
I love Tosh Baker, but I think guard to me is a bigger question mark because even if Tosh Baker doesn't step up, I feel like Notre Dame's going to be fine at tackle. They'll have Jarrett Patterson left tackle, Josh Lugg right tackle, and they'll be really good there. If Tosh steps up, then obviously that gives you a whole new set of circumstances that could be awesome. But they're going to be fine there. They need somebody to step up at guard. And I think Andrew Kristofic is one of their most 5 talented offensive linemen. There's no doubt in my mind he's one of their most 5 talented offensive linemen. The question is he going to turn his potential into production? And that's the big thing for me. I'm trying to remember the game that I was listening to. It might have even been a basketball game recently where they talk about when you're talking about potential, that means a guy's not producing. And there's a lot of that at Notre Dame on this team. There's a lot of guys that we're talking about their potential and their talent, but we're not talking about their proven production.
Right.
And the more of those guys that force the conversation to be about their production, the better it's going to be. And Andrew Kristofic is one for me because you have to shore up the inside of your offensive line.
Absolutely.
In today's era, if you're great at tackle but not great up the middle, you're going to have a good offensive line, but not a great
one.
And you have to be really good up the middle. And to me, Andrew Kristofic is the key to that happening. Now, whether that's he beats out Dylan Gibbons at left guard, or whether Gibbons has a great spring and they move him to right guard to play there, whatever the case may be, Andrew Kristofic has to have the kind of spring that says, hey, coach, I don't care where you start me, but you need to start me somewhere because I'm one of your best linemen.
Conversation.
And he could certainly solidify. If Andrew Kristofic has a breakout spring, that goes a long way towards solidifying this offensive line. Because I feel like there's three guys that I feel good about to varying degrees going into the spring. That's obviously Jarrett Patterson, Josh Lugg, and Zeke Correll. Feel good about to different levels, but I feel like they're at least going to be good players.
Yep.
You need Andrew Kristofic to say, yeah, I got one of these two. Don't worry about this one. I got this one locked down. I'm going to be good, and let's roll.
So the last guy for me, and I've talked about this guy a bunch, and I love his length. I love his size. I love the potential. Again, the big P word, right? I love his potential at corner, and that's Cam Hart. And I was excited to see what he could do last spring because they moved him over to corner and all that. And then, of course, spring got shut down. I think he got buried a little bit on the depth chart last year in the fall, but I think he really needed that spring because then he was using the fall to kind of learn the position. Mm-hmm. And he's one of those guys that really missed out not having that spring.
He was basically doing in the fall what he would have otherwise done.
That's exactly right. And it put him behind the 8 ball a little bit. And so I think this spring is huge for him. Again, I love his physical tools. I love, the fact that he wants to be over there playing defense. I think the sky's the limit for him. And you mentioned it before when you were talking about the cornerback position. It's wide open over there. I mean, there's a bevy of guys with a ton of talent, but where is the cream going to rise to the top? Who is going to be the cream, at that cornerback position? I think Cam Hart has a great opportunity to seize hold of maybe not a starting position, hopefully, but at least a rotation position.
See, my third guy is actually someone that I don't see starting, but I'm excited about him, and that's Riley Mills.
Yeah.
I just have this feeling that him and Jason Adamiola are going to form just this dominant 1-2 punch at 3 technique. And
sure.
I'm excited to see what Jason Adamiola can do, but look, I don't care how good you are at defensive tackle, especially when you're 279 pounds, you're not playing 60-plus snaps a game. At least you shouldn't. Right. Otherwise, when we get to November, you're going to be dragging.
And, you've got depth issues.
And you're probably going to be down to 269 pounds at that point in time. Sure. You have to have depth, and it's about waves on defense now. I mean, Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State, they're throwing waves at you. Notre Dame has the chance to throw waves at you. They do. And what you want to do is, it's one thing to play bodies. It's another thing that when your second wave of players is just as good as your first wave of players. You were doing a hockey deal with Darren the other day. It's the same thing in hockey. I mean, if you're taking your starters out and you're putting in second guy, your first wave or whatever it is in hockey, and those guys aren't nearly as good as your starters, guess what? That's how you lose games. And the same thing here. And that's what's been so different about these recent Notre Dame defensive lines compared to past Notre Dame defensive lines. I would argue the individual talent at the top has not been as good as it was in the early 2000s when you had Stephon Tuitt, Aaron Lynch, Lewis Nix. But now it's just so deep.
Yes.
And Riley Mills is a guy to me that I could see having a big time break. I could see him and Jason Adamiola combining for 15 to 20 tackles for loss. I really could. I think they could be that good. And I've seen some photos that Notre Dame has put out of Riley Mills, like getting ready for spring practice. And it's like, okay, he doesn't look like a freshman anymore. He looks like a grown man. And I just think that 1-2 punch is just going to be really, really special. And if they can both stay healthy, and if he can have the kind of breakout that I think he can have, you talk about Jason Adamiola playing 35, 40 snaps a game and Riley Mills playing 20, 25 snaps a game. And you're just, as an offensive lineman, you're thinking, Lord, please make it stop. He's gonna do some Quentin Nelson, no mossing on people. You remember against USC when the USC D linemen were just like,
those dudes just quit.
They were just turning their back on him and just like letting him push him into the ground. They were like, no more. I can't take any more. I want to see those two guys just make life miserable for opposing guards and tackles and centers, just because it's like you can't block them. I may be putting too much hype and pressure on those two guys, but Vince, I just got a feeling that those two guys are just going to be really, really special this year.